Good afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Hermit. Well, I decided I'm just going to sort of go over this ripening of love. Just take it as it comes. There was a very tempting sermon number 57, by Saint Maximus of Turin from the 4th century, 4th and a little bit into the 5th. It's tempting to read that, but I want to move on with The Ripening of Love, Dr. Wu's book, The Interior Carmel, that is going over the threefold way of love, as he calls it, or John of the Cross didn't necessarily call it this, the three ways of the spiritual life. Other writers have taken, like Father Garrigou-Lagrange in the 20th century wrote of the three ways of the spiritual life, taking John of the Cross's inspirations and teachings through his poetry and through his writings to develop these, how we can progress spiritually. In essence, the holy narrow pathway, but in a little more of structure of how we do it. And then in John of the Cross's description, explanation of his poetry, the living flame of love and the dark night of the soul, and what's the other one? There were three parts to it. So he covered the three spiritual ways through essentially three poems. But just like John Climacus, though, helps us with the content, the action of the holy narrow pathway, looking for the contents. Well, maybe they don't just list out all of them. His rungs of the ladder. But they go in an ascent. They ascend and get more down into the nitty-gritty of the three ways, but the actuality of what we can learn, what makes it holy, and each step of the way. So he has like step 1 on renunciation of life. He writes about how he went through the ways of life way back 5th, 6th century he wrote, and he lived, and how he came to God, came to holiness. Detachment, step 2. I was hoping there would be a listing of them. On exile, gets into all of that. Irrevocable renunciation of everything of one's familiar surroundings that hinders one from attaining the ideal of holiness. Exile, a disciplined heart. So he has 32 steps. So after obedience is this 4th step, and so on, all the way through. It gets further on. Well, they change essence. He goes through the vices and ends up with a little broader. Let's see, more. He goes through the internals and the externals, but the externals are, he gets into things like meekness, does a brief summary of but then he gets the end on stillness. Aspects that are not as didactic, not as literally able to determine or to see the externals of how we would do that. Stillness is more of an interior quality. Well, that was step 27. Prayer, step 28. Just wanted to give this dispassion, step 29. Faith, hope, and love, step 30. So I guess faith, hope, and love take us up through 33. This doesn't have 32 steps. I thought it had 32, but 30 steps anyway, with faith, hope, and love being 31, 32, and 33. So or maybe through 32. But anyway, this is very, very good on a different approach to the Holy Narrow Pathway. And Dr. Wu's book, going over what John of the Cross wrote, but in his own understanding, Dr. Wu's understanding, and adding details to it closer to our time period. In the 20th century, he wrote this. And he considered it the three ways of love, or the flowering of love. So now we're at the ripening of love, which he considers the equivalent to unitive, having union with God, similar to that. So this is what he has to say. And he adds in other thoughts too. I think it's so helpful. But, and he's probably the closest, or to the 21st century of anyone I would read. Because I find great wisdom in those who have died and who have lived and can be trusted with their what they learned and what they teach us. So the ripening of love, he says here, however, like all powers, it is not free from pitfalls. I think it was Lord Acton who said, with reference to political power, all power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So he says it applies to spiritual power, because our fallen nature is so deep-rooted in us that it would take a whole lifetime to uproot it entirely. So he mentions remembering what high spirits, the 72 disciples, returned from their first missionary trip, reporting to Christ, Lord, even the devils are made subject to us in thy name. Luke 10:17. Christ, who knew what it is in man, discerned at once their inborn tendency to attach their hearts to the fruits of their labors, and bade them to raise their minds to heaven and fix their eyes on their ultimate destiny, saying, you, instead of rejoicing that the devils are made subject to you, should be rejoicing that your names are enrolled in heaven. That's from Luke. How many zealous missionaries and lay apostles are stunted in their spiritual development because they set too much store by what they have accomplished and are unconsciously infected by a kind of partisan spirit, a group egoism. So long as you are not completely detached from the fruit of your hands, you are not your love for God is not pure. So he's emphasizing that step, that rung of detachment. This leads us to the beatitude of the clean of heart, which corresponds to the passive purification of the spirit. This purification is necessary because, in the words of Père Garrigou-Lagrange, see, he studied him too. Remember these names if you really want to get into this, into John of the Cross. Read what Père Garrigou-Lagrange writes of the three spiritual ways, of the narrow pathway, essentially, of coming to union with God eventually. The stains of the old man will remain like rust that will disappear only under the action of a purifying fire. The root of the higher faculties of intellect and will is still deeply tainted with pride, personal judgment, and self-will. Remember when I showed you this this. Let me get this. It's here. Make sure it's still running. I think it is. Where the intellect and the will are in the very center of our beings. That's our soul, right in the middle. And going out in the layers outward, the John of the Cross developed this type of paradigm. I don't know if he did it in circles or not, but understanding comes next, then memory, imagination and images, emotions, and then the senses, the inner ones, then the outer ones. This is our human. This is our being right there. And the very interior of us is our intellect and will, which is our soul. And that has to be purified. All of those levels need to be purified. Our senses, our emotions, our understanding, etc., etc. So, connected to the root of the higher faculties of the intellect and will, still tainted with pride, personal judgment, and self-will. Because the will in the center of the intellect, in order to have union with God to be fully ripened, must be so purified that it becomes God's will and God's mind. That's where we're headed with all this, is to become, and our emotions, God's love. That's what all of our existence is about, all of our life. Traveling through life, step by step, spiritually learning how to die to ourselves so that God can enter in, can fill us completely and purify us. So he says, this is the most painful period of one's spiritual life, this final ascent, this final way. But it is also the most crucial. John Tauler was probably speaking of this period when he said, when the Heavenly Father resolves to adorn a soul with sublime gifts and to change it in special wise, it is not his custom to cleanse it gently. Rather is he wont to bathe it in an ocean of bitterness, to plunge and sink it as he did the prophet Jonah in the whale. And this is where you get dark nights of the spirit, where you're being plunged into darkness. I was struggling again today because I had to go to the grocery, had run out of basics, and I just don't want to be out in the world. I don't want to deal with that. I want to be with God, with holiness, with beauty, truth, beauty, and goodness. And who should be at the store? And came up and joked, and I looked, and it was the man who had helped me with my house renovations, the one who had some troubles. And I'm grateful that he came, and I told him so. Because when he called, and I had to, a year ago it was, this spring, and said, I can't do anymore, I can't hire anymore. Not enough money. It's going to either not get done, or I'm going to have to be the one to do it. Except, paying $20 or so for the young man in the neighborhood to come and help me lift things. Other than that, but I can't hire a $60 an hour handyman with trauma from his wife leaving him. So, I did remind him of that the work, it was sort of off and on, the quality and stuff. I can't afford it though, even if it were great work. And that's a reasonable fee. They're up to $80 and $90 and $100 an hour. Handymen. So, I was grateful he came though, because I said, I want you to know it isn't personal. He says, well, how's it coming? Is it falling down? You're joking, is it fall? I said, no, but I said, I'm just now been sick again, just now starting to try to clear away things so that I can have better space and more organization to try to do a few things with it. Finish what little things I can. But I'm very nauseated today. I'm not working today. I need to mow, so I might be able to do that. We'll see how the gut does. But I was struggling being out. And then in the parking lot, here comes a woman in a wheelchair, motorized. She must have been paralyzed from chest down. I think she was using her hands to, operate it. And another person was there with her, a younger person. She was a young woman, though, in her 30s, probably same age as I was when the crash happened. And maybe she was 35, 38, a little older. But she had a smile on her face and was talking with the person who had driven her there and was pushing the grocery cart for her. And it really got to me. And I thought, I can't forget to smile. And, that she was a witness to me of keeping going and of out there enjoying the grocery and all, I thought, thank you, Lord. I'm in this life. I'm alive. You want me to learn to be very gracious and loving in all kinds of ways and not to feel like this. I woke up this morning yet again. Oh. Went to physical therapy, and that man has a daughter who's going through estrangement with him. He's reading a book on it. So the estrangement syndrome, he calls it, not the derangement syndrome, but something like that. Anyway, it's a very clever title. But there's 25% are his statistics. 25% of the population of parents have their adult children have cut them off, estranged from them. It's very trendy now to do that. That's another trend that people are stuck with, and a lot of psychologists are feeding it because some have lost their scruples. Their clients are dependent on making them dependent on them. So they feed this to the clients even. Oh, it's your parents' fault. Oh, you shouldn't have anything to do with them. And then the person goes to the therapist to sort of fill in for not having parents anymore. Adult relationship with parents. It's been happening. Now, not all psychologists do that, obviously, but it's become more of a trend. A psychologist wrote the book, and he wrote about it. He's been a psychologist for, I think, 40 years. Well known in the San Francisco area, Bay Area of California. So, and very reputed clinical psychologist. So, life is people are changing. So there was this woman in her wheelchair or motorized vehicle or little cart thing she sat on, and maybe she was hit by a drunk. I was tempted to go and tell her thank you for the smiling, and tell her that I'm in constant pain from a drunk kid hitting me, and I'm having a rough day, and needed to see your smile. Because something had happened to her. Who knows what? Maybe she was married to someone or had a boyfriend who beat her up and broke her neck right below the level that would affect her arms or something. Things happen. So it's just important for us to stick with God, keep with the narrow pathway, learn the spiritual life, learn the ways, and understand that God is leading us. Just like this, Dr. Wu says, well, from John Towler. I'm trying to remember what century he was in. But that the Heavenly Father resolves to adorn a soul with sublime gifts, to change it in a special way. It is not his custom to cleanse it gently at this phase. This phase where he's preparing us to have union with him. He bathes it in an ocean of bitterness, plunges and sinks it as he did the prophet Jonah. One of the causes of this bitterness is that the more illumined one's soul is by divine light, the more one becomes conscious of sin. It is, in effect, like sunlight shining through some vent into a dark room, revealing countless specks of hitherto unsuspected dust dancing in its ray. And that's, see, it's when when even the world gets to us. We see all the crud. I called it yesterday the mayhem of people just doing whatever they want. And the physical therapist today, like such as with his daughter, his sweet daughter, but his ex-wife has personality disorder, probably borderline personality disorder, with maybe some psychopath in it, because she lies a lot, but is gradually turning the daughter against her father. And the daughter is just turned 19, and otherwise had been close to her dad, but the mother had abused the girl when she was young. It's part of the reason, ended up everything came to light, and they separated, the parents did, and divorced. The wife was an alcoholic and did get treatment, so stopped abusing the daughter. But the daughter has blocked that. Well, I understand all this kind of stuff from my situation with a couple of my kids. So it's blocked things of their dad. The son especially has. So it's hard. There's a lot of sickness out there, and I told him, I said, it's women too. Women can have as many personality disorders or more than men now. Used to be more prominent with men, certain disorders. But we can start seeing so much sin out there. And it is like light shining into a dark room, but it's painful seeing the dark room. And we see our own sins and then have the guilt, That's a big thing I deal with. Just feeling terrible that I thought I was in that store. Was I smiling? I was pleasant to people, but I don't think I smile much at all. And what a smile can do for others. So here's David. King David was in this state when he cried, "Withhold not thou, O Lord, thy tender mercies from me. Thy mercy and thy truth have always upheld me. For evils without number have surrounded me. My iniquities have overtaken me, and I was not able to see. They are multiplied above the hairs of my head, and my heart hath forsaken me." That's from Psalm 39. And David was not alone in experiencing this terrible night, for another psalmist wrote the De Profundis, Psalm 129. If thou, O Lord, wilt mark iniquities, Lord, who shall stand it? For with thee there is merciful forgiveness, and by reason of thy law I have waited for thee, O Lord. My soul hath relied on his word, my soul hath hoped in the Lord. From the morning watch until night, let Israel hope in the Lord. So it is a question here of fruitful spiritual suffering and of a spiritual winter that prepares the germination of a new spring, writes Garrigou-Lagrange. Before your soul can take wing, it must be buried in its cocoon, completely dead to the world and to self. I was thinking today, when I thought about over the weekend, how dark everything got within. I was really in a dark, dark place. And how I was picking at things out in the world. And I realized, that's one thing of a hermit. Spare yourself from looking at the world. So I didn't look at any news headlines this morning. I knew, don't risk it, don't risk it. There's enough in me then that surfaces, that is that I see, that I want purified. And in ways that I need more discipline, more training, more will over the intellect even. Die to the world and to self. The best way for a soul in this state to conduct itself is in complete abandonment to the good pleasure of the Lord and in absolute confidence in his power to cure even the cancer of self-will and the leprosy of evil desires. Let him operate in you and trust in his power to cure you. Say to him with David, create a clean heart in me, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. That's from Psalm 50. Approach God as the wise leper did, or Jesus, God is Jesus. Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And if he will certainly stretch forth his hand and touch you, saying, I will, be thou cleansed, the more hopeless you are in yourself, the more hopeful you are in the Lord. That's good, that's good to read. Because, we can feel desolate. I've been feeling this way, just hopeless. And even with my shoulder's very bad, the physical therapist tested it, said the rotator cuff seems to be okay. Not super strong, but he says doesn't feel torn. It is so painful, it's just more pain. I think that's what's making me sick to my stomach, is the shoulder pain. And on top of just this bodily pain that has increased like arachnoiditis does. No surprise. Not feeling sorry for myself. It's just hard to cope with it. It's strong enough that it's become very noticeable within. And it's dismal then. And then when I add to it my sins, my attitudes, my criticizing people, my seeing the world as it is, and knowing I really can't do anything about it but pray, and, however, get my life in a good way, live my life well, at least do that. Don't add to the ick and the crud. But then I see that I've got a lot to do. That I'm made decisions that have caused me more difficulty, more work when I don't feel well, things like that, that then keep me from more spiritual life. But we can't just stay in a cloud either. We have to have enough temporal to deal with, to practice with. Because, I can get to that point where I can just float away with the books and the reading and the scriptures. And, oh, how good it seems. But that's not practice. We need practice time, practice material. And that's living our lives. Interacting a little bit with others. Even if it's a hermit in a grocery store. And a man was embarrassed because he couldn't find the zucchini. A young man, employee, was helping him. He said, "See, it says squash up there." And the elderly man was embarrassed. And he says, "But but I was looking for zucchini," and I went over to him. The young man had left, and I said, "It is confusing. They should put zucchini up there, shouldn't they?" Obviously, it is zucchini squash. And he says, "Well, it looked like it," but he was uncertain. And he was telling the young man, "I'm confused. I can't find it. I'm confused." And bless his heart, So I tried to make him feel better. That was one thing, at least I can look back. We should look at good things that we do, because I can get overwhelmed with seeing all that I did not do. Like not smiling, or just, feeling so sick, physically sick, with pain. And then here comes this woman in her wheelchair, unable to move, but she'd still have pain probably. She probably gets tailbone sores from sitting all the time, etc. So anyway, get back to this place here. This is what we're supposed to approach him like the wise leper did, asking Jesus to make us clean, to help us, to heal us, to cleanse us. And the more hopeless you are in yourself, the more hopeful you are in the Lord. Only keep your heart open and let Christ, the eternal Son, shine into it, and he will purify it and cause it to open out in his light until it overflows with the joy and sweetness it has received. This introduces you to the unitive stage. We're being introduced to the unitive stage, where what the mystics call spiritual betrothal and spiritual marriage take place. I should prefer to speak of it in terms of the consummation, so far as it is possible in this life, of our birthright as children of God. Well, I can tell him this is not consummation, but he doesn't know. I mean, it's more of a mental consummation. That's what it is. But there's another consummation, one which I'm waiting for and yearning for. And it actually is a type of consummation that is even akin to a sexual one of a marriage, consummating the marriage. It is so far beyond anything of this life. So, and Father Vincent told me it often happens at death. If we've already had the mystical betrothal and the mystical marriage, and even the banquet, the celebration, the banquet, then comes the consummation. But that, if you've had the others, that often happens at death, the consummation. So that's what I'm waiting for, is death, and that's why I longed for death at times, for the consummation. But I decided yesterday I'm going to write signs to have. Put this on a chart for me of what to say to Christ and how to keep my mind focused. Because this is still good steps for the mystical marriage. And it is the introduction of the unitive stage, but understand that you can already have a betrothal or a marriage and still be all over the place, kind of. It's not all together in steps that you never need to go back and do anymore. I guess, am I explaining that right? I've had my mystical betrothal and my mystical marriage. My spiritual father said, yes, Father Vincent, yes, yes. And my dad that's passed away, because it was back the banquet was 12 years ago, last September. And yet, see, there's still other things. So it's not always in a total continuum that you never, that once you're at this point, you never have to go through anything else that you've already been through. So, like the mystical marriage, think of a marriage. Once you're married, it's not all the be all and end all of marriage. There's growth going on in that marriage. That's the way to describe it. And when you're engaged, it's not just all over. Oh, we're engaged, that's it. No, there's a process during the betrothal period in which you're still learning each other and knowing each other and interacting with each other and growing. So it's when you have these phases, it's not that you won't still need to grow or repeat growth practically, repeat things, but just at deeper levels of learning and understanding it. And it can go on for all this lifetime, and even after we've died, the progression can continue. And that's the same with the marriage, the spiritual marriage. It's not just a one-time thing, and then you're just ready for the consummation. No, you're still growing in the relationship with God, with Christ, always. And with others in relationship with, as a married person or as an engaged person. We're not perfected yet. Even with the mystical marriage, it's a phase, it's a stage, it's a level. And we continue to grow and become closer and closer to our beloved and get to know him better and better. My parents lived 60 years married. They had passed their 60th anniversary. And they were still experiencing. They hadn't experienced one or the other passing yet in their final illness and death. So that happened in their 60th year of marriage. 60 and a half years was when my dad died. And so that was a process they had together. And my mother then lived 3 more years, I think it was. And she had a lot of growth to go through, more than my dad had needed. And her progression when she died, at least in earth time, went on like, I think it was 17 more years. My dad, within 6 months, was shown going to heaven, being led by his angel into heaven. So he didn't have as much of purification that he needed. So, as my mother did, just different things to overcome and to learn. My mother took side steps. She got herself into some new age. And she had a terrible temper that was, I understood why, but that was something she had to conquer. And the fallout from it, how it affected people, I think was probably what she was progressing through on the other side. I don't know for sure at all. But I do know that her length was much more than, at least by earth time, for her to be bathed in light, fullness of light. But even in this life, we have times where we have light. Yesterday, there was light with me, lots of light. Today, I'm getting light, but, different bits of light, understandings and seeing truth, beauty, and goodness in others. So, he says, I should prefer to speak of it in terms of the consummation, so far as it is possible in this life, of our birthright as children of God. We have seen that in this first stage of the Son led you to the Father, and in the second stage, the Father led you to the Son. In the third stage, Father and Son together pour their spirit of love into your heart. And because you are sons, God hath sent the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Galatians 4:6. Only then have we begun to live on the deeper levels of reality. Most of us, as Mother St. Austin says, not familiar with Mother St. Austin, I'm going to look her up, live on the surface of ourselves. Most of us live on the surface of ourselves. Underneath is a fathomless sanctuary where spirit and spirit can meet. Holy Spirit and our human spirit can meet. That is the secret place where the Holy Ghost, the love of the Father and of the Son, makes love to us. And this comes from the Divine Crucible of Purgatory, some book. That Dr. Wu took that line from. When you have the Spirit of the Son, and then you have his freedom, his peace, and his joy, which the world cannot take away from you, perhaps as good a description as can be found of the unitive state has been given by John Taller in his sermon in preparation for Whitsuntide. St. Augustine says that there is a mysterious place deep in the soul that is beyond time in this world, a part higher than that which gives light, life, and movement to the body. True prayer so raises the heart that God can come into this innermost place, the most disinterested, intimate, and noble part of our being, the seat of our unity. It is his eternal dwelling place, God's eternal dwelling place. And into this grand and mysterious kingdom, he pours the sweet delight of which I have spoken. Then is man no longer troubled by anything. He is recollected, quiet, and really himself, and become daily more detached, spiritualized, and contemplative. For God is within him, reigning and working in the depths of his soul. In this state you attain on the supernatural plane the stage that Confucius attained on the natural plane, when he could follow the dictates of his heart without transgressing the boundaries of right. The season of songs has come, and the music, says St. Bernard of Clairvaux, is not a noise of the mouth, but a shout of the heart, not a sound of the lips, but a tumult of internal delights, a harmony of wills, not of voices. You would be like a musician who is so full of his art that without any effort all that he does therein is perfection. He's describing this state where we've had the betrothal, we've had the marriage. We're in this place of near union with God. You would saying you'd be like a musician, etc. When closely examined, would be found in perfect conformity with prescribed rules, without rule, yet exactness itself, without measure, yet nothing better proportioned, without reflection, yet nothing better managed, without effort, nothing more efficacious, without forethought, yet nothing better fitted to unforeseen events. Being united with their God, such happy souls are truly beyond the categories of active or contemplative life. They are actively contemplative and contemplatively active. God is their love and their all. If he wishes them to be passive, passive they will be. If active, then active. Or if contemplative, then they will rejoice in contemplation. He's describing us in this state. They know interiorly that it is God who has made ready the inner room of their soul, and he wishes to dwell therein to the exclusion of all his creatures. They are all things to all men, without being attached to anything. Happy the soul who can say, I become in his presence, in God's presence, as one finding peace. Night or day, in season or out of season, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, such a soul is wedded to the tremendous lover, and finds him more and more lovable as the years go by. In these circumstances, life is a veritable prelude to heaven. It may not be unfitting to conclude this section with an old Chinese love song, which spiritually interpreted will perhaps give an inkling of the joy of the saints. I'm not going to read that right now. I just want to say that Dr. Wu is describing the unitive phase. But he's doing so with a general description of the joy, the love, the peace with God. But from my experience in this phase, you still are going to have dark nights. There's still more to be learned. I think it's when the consummation has occurred is when you will have that fullness and will not be as one finding peace, as he says, all things to all men. But we've come to a point where we know God is our all, and we are nothing without God. And that's sort of what I was describing the other day of when I said I have no enjoyment in this life anymore. I don't, unless I see God in it. That's the marriage. And many of you have experienced that. But it isn't that we find that we see God in everything yet. We're still distracted. We're in the world. But as soon as we think of it and realize that a lot of it we're still just going through motions because we're happily married, or we're betrothed and married, and I had been through the betrothal, we've had the marriage, and we're living life in this world, waiting for our lover to come back to consummate the marriage and take us with him. In other words, die and be with him forever and ever, consummated. We have to remind ourselves that yes, we are in this world, and we find enjoyment, find joy, and have our peak experiences of light and everything when we are consciously and subconsciously but strongly connected with Christ, with our lover, with our beloved, with our spouse. But then there will be times that the temporal world will lead us off and our thoughts won't be, and all of a sudden we'll realize I'm not enjoying any of this. When's Jesus coming for me? And then we go back to the practice of seeing God in everything and in other people. And even in the souls of people who are confused or sexually disordered, or have gender dysphoria, or severe personality disorders, that they don't even recognize that they have these and are struggling. But God is still in them. And it's easy for us to forget that. And then all this love comes back when we do. And when we see Christ in them, when we see the touch of God in them, and or even God's disappointment in them or in us. For those of you who have been married or are married, there will be times when you and your spouse will have disagreements, or that we can understand that we're disappointed in ourselves, feel like we haven't done enough for our beloved. And sometimes we haven't. And then we start working on that, improving again. But it doesn't mean that we're not married or not engaged. So, whatever phase we're in. But those things become less and less. And it isn't the end of being plunged in darkness or bitterness and being washed again either. But at some point, which I think is the consummation, maybe LS has information on this. I bet she or he would. So, LS, if you hear this, please weigh in what you think, what God has let you know. But to me, I'm thinking once the marriage is consummated, we won't be going through these temporal issues. There will not then, because we will be purified then. We will be made one with God. When a marriage is consummated, that's when the man and the woman come together in union. Sexual union, physical union. And if they're soulmates, a spiritual union too. Or one person, if the love is true and mature, will feel a spiritual consummation. But definitely with God, that's what happens. And it's a peak experience, overwhelming. I know that just because of how I was begging Jesus to consummate our marriage. Even pleading. We've even had the banquet. We had had the banquet. It was beautiful. It was delightful. Guests and all. And, but no. Said, you must wait. You must be strong, but you must wait. I have to go to other souls. I will be back to consummate. I'll come back for you and take you with me. But you must wait. Oh my. It's crushing. It's crushing. But just being in his presence was such a high that, and I had no idea how long. I didn't think it would be 12 years, now into the 13th year. But I have things to do and things to learn and practice in the marriage. I'm married to him. And so I'm still like my mom and dad. They were still getting to know each other in different ways, even after 60 years of marriage. So, I don't know, that's the best way I can describe what seems to be that it's not just a one and done. We're still, and that's what I forget what saint or whatever I'd read before, not long ago, maybe a month or 6 weeks ago, that I understood then, even in our progression, once we're totally purified in union with God, there's still aspects of God we will still be seeking to know. And we will never be God. We will never know all. It will always be something more to know and to love about God. Our love will never be finite, concluded, that there will be nothing more to learn or to feel or to experience with God. So there will always be progression. But once we have union, but the unitive phase is a phase. It's not a just, I had union with God yesterday, so that's it now, No, it's not like that. There's still more. And we will still have, until we're purified. We're not perfect yet. Not until we become one with Him in consummation. And I think with the saints and things, I think it probably can happen in this life. I think it's very, very rare. Like Father Vincent said, mostly it's when you've died or after you've died, not before the consummation is. So, anyway, this is all the ripening of love, the third phase, the third way, the unitive, coming to union with God. But all these aspects happen in this phase. That sense of knowing, that God is our all, and of not being satisfied with anything else, really. Nothing else satisfies. We long for God, but we exist in this state and strive in the virtues all the same, and strive to be a good spouse to our beloved with others, to represent him well, being married to him, whether we're male or female, doesn't matter. As Jesus says in Scripture at some point, indicates that, we're genderless souls on the other side. In heaven, we're not going to be male or female. At least I forget where it was in Scripture. But Jesus indicates that. And there's no marriage in heaven either. So the only marriage is with Christ. And the only consummation is with Christ, with God, to become one, to become one with His love. And that's when we are purified. But even then, there will always be more that we will learn of love, of His love. And we will never fully know God. He's unfathomable. He's impenetrable. There's always going to be an infinite aspect to God. So I'll read this now. I'll read this Chinese love song, which Dr. Wu says, spiritually interpreted, will give an inkling of the joy of the saints. But understand Teresa of Avila, she was a saint. John of the Cross was. But they still had temporal hassles they were dealing with. Teresa was. John was, even up, he was being backstabbed within a couple of days of his death. And just the physical suffering alone was temporal. Teresa also, I'd read been a couple months ago, that final chapter in the one book that described her death and how ill she was. Barely made it back to Alba de Tormes and the convent where she died, and her favorite one where she wanted to be, and made it there barely, but suffered and died, and really suffered. Was very, very weak by the time she got there. So cold is the wind, chill the rain. The cock crows kickeree. Now that I have seen my love, peace has come to me. The wind whistles, the rain drizzles. The cock crows cuckoo. Now that I have seen my love, my sickness is healed too. The wind and the rain darken the day. The cock ceases not to crow. Now that I have seen my love, my joy ceases not to grow. My joy ceases. Okay, so the joy continues to grow. Use the double negative there. So no matter what, rain or shine, peace is there, joy is there, and that's true. And the more we recognize Christ in everything, that there is our enjoyment on earth also. Not only within ourselves, though. I spoke about the inner joy. The inner joy is always there because Jesus remains in us. And that's for everyone, but it's when we acknowledge and when we are aware. These three phases, in part, are learning to become aware of these spiritual realities as they occur, but they are actual things that do occur. And we continue on then. As long as we're still here in the temporal, we still have to deal with the temporal world. And we're still going to have temporal issues, though. And the more that we can see God in all of the temporal, except evil, of course, but he's in people who choose evil or to sin because we sin. Now, I don't know about Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. Probably had little venial sins, minuscule little things. I don't know, but possibly. But that's not the same as evil. Or if it were something, it would be very, very human kind of a thing. Like moaning in pain or something, which is not a sin at all. It's just being human and in a death process. So they were beyond any kind of sins that were but vices and things, actions, words, thoughts. The devil tempts, though, right up to the last breath, including in the last breath. Some saints have had tremendous battles with the devil in their dying process. Really battle it out, because the devil still wants to get them. So it's not that we're done with the temporal world until we're done with it. And while we're here I had this dream the other night. I haven't been having them, but this one was an important one, but it was just very simple. Very, very simple. But God had given me this chain. It was a very beautiful, fine, gold chain, several of them together, intricate, very thin and fine. And I had it in my hands. It was hanging down from my hands. He put them on my hands, over my, I was holding them and they were draped down. And he let me know that even though they were fine and beautiful, high carat gold, very fine and intricate little chains, gorgeous. And I put them on my hands. He says, even though they're fine and delicate and beautiful and pure, pure gold, not pure, it'd be too soft, but, probably 10 or 12 carat or something, not gold plate. But he says they are still chains, and you need to be rid of, you cannot function with these, as beautiful and delicate as they are and fine and thin, any more than you can with a heavy chain, a big clumsy chain. But he was letting me know I'm down to fine tuning. These were fine little chains, very delicate, but yes, indeed, they had my hands, were caught with them, just as much as if it had been a chain to an anchor of our boat or something. I don't have a boat now, but growing up, we had this lake house my dad and mom had gotten, and we had a fishing boat and a chain on an anchor, and just metal, galvanized or something so it wouldn't rust, and it was no different than that. You still can't, if it's laid over your hands, you still can't use your hands as well, no matter the type of chain. So, but at least it's fine tuning. So I'm glad I thought of that, because it's easy to let messages like that dissipate in the nausea, in the shoulder pain, in the gloom or the darkness of a spiritual dark night, or even in a dark night of the soul or dark night of the spirit, either way, or in encounters with people, or ugliness that we see out in the world, unfairness, or like my physical therapist said, we have become victims to people who've made themselves victims. They are victimizing us. We are slaves to their issues, their dysfunctions, their problems. And they hold us captive. We are the victims. He says, what? It's becoming a sick, sick world. Yes. Yes, indeed. But we have God and prayer, and we can stand up to it. We can at least acknowledge it and point it out if we need to. If somebody is being mistreated, we can at least say, we're sorry that this has happened, or this is what has happened. And not go along with the crowd saying, oh, it's okay, or, oh, how wonderful, Go along with the trend that is a perversion or something, or how did he put it? With that we are being forced to accept other people's disorders. That was it, sexual dysfunction. And how did he? And laud it even as something great and wonderful, and being led by then these confused people in some cases. Which is sad, There's great compassion But he says things would become flipped. And the victims are victimizing others in essence. So that's the world, but we can still see and pray and love God and stay on our holy narrow pathway and not just go along with being duped. We can still see truth, beauty, and goodness and acknowledge there's right and wrong. And for ourselves, not be all enchained in something that is gross or abnormal, disordered, ultimately unjust, such as a person does then put themselves into a situation in the world where there's payment, career, job, competition, effect that will happen that will automatically make other people not able to achieve because someone of another gender, a stronger gender, is in that position and will take the prize. So we may have to remove ourselves from situations. Some have done that. A fencer recently did that, a female fencer. Just said, well, got on her knee. Didn't say anything, but just took a knee. And that was, in effect, I'm not going to fence with this man who says he's a woman. So, and got penalized, disqualified from everything. And I think they thought her career was over. Evidently, they've worked something out, but her total career even is going to be over because of that, because of her. It's like that fable, the emperor wore no clothes. All the crowds, and the people the courtiers, the ones that helped the king, the emperor, and everybody, oh yes, oh you look wonderful, you look wonderful. He was convinced that he had clothes on and he was buck naked and was in a parade or something, a procession, and all of the crowd had to go along with it or felt they did. And oh, how wonderful he looks, and cheered for him instead of laughing. But at the very end, he found out, or something happened that that somebody had the courage to say, but he's naked. He doesn't have any clothes on. And but we get that way. We can feel cowed by society and by the new rules of engagement. Who wants to be sued? Who wants to be penalized for not going along with an absurdity in a way, or a fraud? Especially if the person isn't psychologically damaged or disordered or confused about their gender and just wants an advantage by saying, I identify as a girl, therefore I'm going to play on this girl's team to get the prize, to get the awards, to get the scholarship. So anyway, the ripening, the unitive phase, is when we have come so close and in oneness with God that we have light, that we know that there is nothing for us other than God. We don't really have, deep down, if we're honest, interest in other than God. God is our all. God means everything to us at that point. We're so in love, and we've been engaged, and then we're married, had this celebration even and waiting for the consummation. God blesses real presence in us. And remember always, Christ is in us, his love is in us, therefore we always have inner joy. And that's true whether or not you're in the unitive phase. That's the illuminative phase, is knowing this, realizing it, being illumined that this is true. Then in the unitive phase, you're experiencing it more and more. And that's how to phase. And there are phases too. And there may be things in your life that you'll suddenly realize, well, I still need to be purged of some fine-tuning. So you might find yourself briefly experiencing the purgative phase, the phase of, what did he call it? Was that the bud growing? Yeah, the budding, the bud developing. It's conceivable that there's aspects that, because it's not just a one and done thing, it's always a process. I've seen it in trees where there's already leaves on it, but then there's little new buds starting up too still. So see how that goes. It's good. I like his analogy with nature because that helps express it better. But the fullness, when it flowers, usually, most of the plant has flowered, if not all, but most, definitely. And other things are still some buds might still form, some other things might start to flower. Oh, but when it has the fruit, then you can still have leaves, though. There might still be a few flowers left, or even a few buds left on the tree or the plant. So, but with consummation, and once it's dead, then we're in another realm. But see, we'll still progress there if we don't in this life. So that's why Catherine of Genoa said, grow in this life as much as you can. Grow, grow, grow. Learn, learn. Learn love. Practice all the virtues, and come to understand God. Fall in love. Be as a loving couple with God. And because, otherwise it just gets put off. Don't kick the can down the road. Because then we'll see more when we're dead. And we'll regret, there can be remorse of, like I felt, had I done more, maybe the consummation could have happened 12 years ago. But I still had things he said he was going off for, so I still had things I had to do. Waiting, for one thing, learning patience and strength. He repeated, be strong, twice. So I have to do that. I have to develop strength and not crumble. Be able to handle these dark nights that come, and to handle the suffering, the pain. Well, I think you all have lots to think on this. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's a whole nother life and challenge for us that's so gorgeous and beautiful. And we love it because we love God so much. God blesses real presence in us.